Right, good morning. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Bible and Brekkie. Excited to be back here with three-fourths of our group. So I know Steven is probably still sleeping because he's in the what is it, Pacific time. But Gabe, good to see you. Brian, how you guys doing?
Good, man. Can't complain. Still, drinking my mate. It's a little bit washed out
Uh-oh.
because it's been a while. We've been talking for a bit before we went live. So,
Yeah.
but good, man. Good conversation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good here, man.
Good man. Good man. Yo, what's the mate cutoff time
What do you mean
during the
mate
day? Is
cutoff
there
time?
is there is there a certain time where you don't like after 3 p.m. I'm like I'm not done. I'm done.
Nah,
I
bro.
think I think it comes to a point where you just become saturated. Or you're like, yeah,
That's
like
it.
I'm done. But I mean, people can have this. Listen, my dad drinks his mate. He, I don't know. I just found out this yesterday when I spoke with him over the phone. He was drinking and he was like, "Listen, I make my mate, and then that mate lasts me till lunch.
The
Have
same
lunch,
mate.
whatever. Yeah, have lunch, whatever. And then like at 3 or 4, he starts his second mate that lasts him until whatever time.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I'm like, bro, you're old. Like that already doesn't taste that well. And
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
told him that he's old. He's like adding stuff like ginger or whatever to his mate. I'm like, yeah, bro,
Ooh, no.
your
Ginger.
taste buds are dying off, my friend. Um,
Yuck.
and so I'm guessing it comes with age.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm
that's good for
still,
you.
yeah, it is good for him. He
He's
it
putting
helps his throat and
vitaminas,
stuff like
protein
that.
powder, ginger.
Protein powder. I don't know. I don't know about protein powder, but
Oh,
I mean, you know,
yeah.
it also depends on the herb that you buy. Like some herb is like really good; it'll last you a little bit longer.
Right.
Others are just like really bitter at first, and it will only last you a few minutes.
Right.
Some people like to, pour water all over it, and then it just becomes blah.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but yeah, I mean,
Quick,
if you have your little mountain going on, it should last you a little bit longer. But
yeah.
even then,
Quick story. Brian's first week in Andrews. Uh, we went to drop off Nanivet at the airport because she was visiting. She was helping Brian settle in, and then she was gonna fly back to Boston from Chicago. So driving to Chicago from Berrien Springs is pretty long, about almost 2-hour drive to the airport at least. And so we had some mates on our way to the airport. For some reason, we didn't have any dinner or, grab it. Like we just had snacks. That's for some reason, that's all we had time for. So while we were at the airport, we had some mate again. We were drinking some more. And then when we left on our way back to Berrien Springs, it was, late. I want to say, Brian, maybe like 10 p.m. when we were driving back. It was pretty late. It was already like way, way dark. And so we had some more mate. Like we stopped somewhere, we heated up some, got some hot water, and we went back, drinking mate. And we got back, I want to say like maybe midnight, and we didn't have any, food, so we stopped. Only thing that was open was like a McDonald's in Berrien Springs. So we got like a bunch of stuff off the dollar menu, and we went back, to the dorm because that's where we were staying at the time. Bro, we stood up till like 4 a.m. We just could not go to sleep because we had so much mate running in our system, and it was to the point where like one of us would say one thing that was so corny, but we would just start cry laughing because it was just like our bodies wanted to go to sleep, but our minds
overdose with a
miles per
yeah,
hour. Yeah,
we literally cried ourselves to sleep, but
yeah.
but in a good way, I guess.
Yeah,
And I feel like the next day is the worst after that too. You're so tired. You feel like
I don't think I've drank mate after like 11 p.m. again since then. I mean, I really will stay up all night.
Yeah. It depends for me. Sometimes it
Yeah.
does hit me like pretty hard, and I'm like, oh man, like I can't fall asleep.
Mhm.
But most of the time, I
It's
can
not that
drink typically at any time, and oh, it's bedtime. All right, cool, and
Oh.
I'm out.
Right.
But yeah, that happens to me as well, where I can't go to sleep. I can't fall asleep because I had mate too recently. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Well, there you go. There you have it, folks. Mate story time. What's the other story that your frasco broke
Oh yeah. So
and you didn't have one for a while?
this is not it. But it was like a thermos kind of like this one. This is 90s, right? And so it's plastic, and then it has like leather on the outside, but the inside, oh, this still has water in it. The inside, I don't want to pour this water on my
Yeah,
computer,
it's glass.
but let me see if you can see that. It's
Yeah.
glass. Let me
Yeah.
try to put it in front of my face.
Ah, what
Uh,
a camera!
Wow,
so
man, that's a
so
pretty
it's glass on the inside, man, and some guy. This happened twice. The first time, it was on the table in the dorm, and my roommate, was leaving for class. I'm guessing he was in a hurry, and he knocked it over with his book bag. Um, and so the inside, since it's glass, it fell like this. It was really heavy because it was full, right, with water, and it broke. It shattered into a million pieces.
Oh my.
Luckily, no, we didn't have a mate. So what I was heating up my water with, this is student life. You don't really have money. Was one of those like $8 coffee makers, and so I would put in just water, no coffee, obviously, and
Right.
then it would heat up, and I'd have to put it in twice so that it'd be hot enough for mate, and that's what we drank mate with for like I want to say maybe 2 weeks until
Until you got a
until a
new
metal one came in, right? Which it wasn't even a good metal one. It was like a used up, like no one used it at home anymore. It was a metal thermos, and that's what we used for a few
That's
weeks.
rough. That's rough.
I got it repaired because the glass part you can take out.
Mm-hmm.
Not in this one, but in the other ones, you just screw it out. And then some dude whose wedding I got invited to recently, uh, it was sitting on the cafeteria. He knocked it over, and it shattered, and
Oh
it's
my.
been shattered ever since. It's sitting like uh, as decor, I guess, or decor, however you say that,
Oh my goodness.
on my mother-in-law's, on my in-laws' house, there on top of like one of the kitchen cabinets, still broken.
Still broken. To
Yeah.
memories. To memories, man. Cheers to memories.
Yeah.
But mate, man, it's a community drink.
Yeah, I was pretty upset.
I'm sure. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of crazy.
I had to walk out and I was upset.
Yeah, like I'm done with this. Oh man. But well, there you go, folks. Mate story time. Bible and Brekkie. Thank you guys, and we'll see you all next week, I guess.
All right.
All right. Now, well, we're going into a new book, Galatians 1. And as mentioned by Brian, it is a theologically rich book. So if you want true theology, go to YouTube. If not, stay. I'm just kidding. No, we'll be good. We'll be good. But as always, the premise of this is that we haven't really done the research behind it. It's more of just how we process initially reading through this. We might have some commentaries or just some of our thoughts that pop out from in this moment, or things that we've heard before, or how we've studied before. But going into Galatians 1, a book written by Paul, and so we're just going to jump into it and start reading it here. And so it starts like this, Galatians 1. Hopefully you can see that. It says, Paul, an apostle sent not from men nor by a man, but by Jesus Christ and God the Father, who raised him from the dead. And all the brothers and sisters with me to the churches in Galatia, grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, who gave himself for our sins to rescue us from the present evil age, according to the will of our God and Father, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen. And so we'll just go down to verse 10 for now. I'm astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and are trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let them be under God's curse, as we have already said. So now I say again, if anybody is preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted, let them be under God's curse. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Man, this is my line right here. I just gonna highlight it a bit real quick. Important. All right. Breaking it down. Any thoughts here from these first 10 verses of Galatians 1? First thing that sticks out to me in verse 1 is I'm wondering just what the context is and what's been going on in the church that he has to, in the beginning, say, I'm an apostle and I'm sent from not from men nor by a man, but by literally Jesus Christ and God the Father. So he's trying to, like, from the beginning, establish himself again. I mean, he's already been there, as is mentioned later, right? He's saying, hey, don't turn away from what I taught you when I was there. But it seems as though people maybe came in and were discrediting his ministry or his apostleship, his words. And here he is trying to, as we saw again, as we've seen in other books, trying to always prove and to fight for the validity of his ministry, right? Which I'm sure he probably faced a lot from all sides, from Pharisees and people in the Jewish faith to even Christians who were who knew of him persecuting the church or who were envious of him going to the Gentiles and telling them about the good news. So here he is saying, hey, my message and my apostleship comes from Jesus Christ and God the Father, which then I think allows him to, my verse, which I'll speak on later, but that verse at the end of 10, that he's not pleasing people, but because if he were, then he wouldn't be a servant of Christ.
Right. It seems like Paul, in this instance, he feels the need to communicate his credentials, right? I don't know about you guys, but sometimes, you might run into situations where it's necessary, where you have to, just communicate, hey, like, I'm not making this up. This is, verified. And he does that later on in the chapter as well. Like he revisits the thought that, hey, look, I was a Jew, I was a Pharisee, and I was, progressing past all the Pharisees, right? Until Christ eventually, revealed himself to him. So it seems like whatever message is being communicated in Galatia, part of the false teaching, right, the gospel that he says is not really a gospel, part of that is to discredit whatever Paul has already preached there. So maybe that's why he's saying this, like, hey, I wasn't sent by man, nor am I here to please man.
Right.
Sorry, I just started myself a mate as he was finishing. I thought he was going to go for a little bit longer there.
You pulled that. I'm drinking, so I can't talk right now. Sorry.
Yeah, let me think for a little bit longer. No. Yeah, I think I agree with what you guys are communicating. Verse 1 really just further accents verse 10, right? Where it seems like basically Paul is saying that he does not come from man, right? He doesn't come from an angel, but directly, like, God is the one who has called me, right? This Jesus who I preached to you is the one who appeared to me. And he does that because it seems like, they're changing their gospel for like a different message to
Mm-hmm.
appease certain people, right?
Right.
And so, in essence, what Paul is saying, like, listen, I'm preaching with an authority not given to me by people or by a man or anything like that. And that's what these guys are bringing to you. Like, oh, because this person said, or I mean, the whole thing is about like the law or whatnot. So who knows? Maybe they're saying like, oh, oh no, Moses said this thing, and Paul's like, yeah, cool. Some guy said it, but who sent me was Jesus. And I don't really see anything else that kind of stood out to me apart from that.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think it's interesting. Kind of just the lengths he goes to talk about the message that the other people are talking about, which I think is frustrating. I mean, we probably see. I don't know if we've seen it in our churches as pastors. And going back to your point too, on the credentials, right? I don't know if you guys have ever pulled out your pastor card. I don't think I have. I don't know if I like to do that.
I'm not a fan of it.
I'm not a fan of it. Your conversations or people, hey, I'm the pastor. And we've seen people do that, right? I went to school for 6-7 years. I know what I'm talking about. You probably read in a forum. I don't think it ever goes well like that. But to do that, but I think there are times where, and I don't think Paul's doing that necessarily here. He's more of saying, hey, yo, you guys know me. Like I'm a guy, my story, and he'll go into more of his story later. But just the hurt he's facing, where people keep doubting him. And maybe we've seen that in a way where he tells Timothy, right? Don't let anybody look down on you because you're young. Sometimes maybe, like maybe you, especially you, Gabe, as you have, 2-3 churches and you're the senior, or right, you're a senior, or technically
the only pastor.
Right? So I'm sure people are like, you're a young pastor, you don't know, you're still learning, and so it's still being like, no, I'm still a pastor. I'm that just because I'm young doesn't discredit what I've been called to do. So. Right. Yeah, it's interesting that he's, and I think that's something we can relate to, where he's trying to prove himself over and over to these people. And in different letters, he's right. Hey, look, I'm not a guy that comes here trying to ask for money. I work hard myself. I feed myself. Either that, or he's like, hey, my message is always Jesus and him crucified. So he's always trying to say like, hey, me, man. Like I'm not like these other dudes that come in here. And we read that in what book was it that he says, some people preach Jesus out of, I don't know if that was I forget, but some
Philippians or Romans.
Yeah, some people preach Jesus for various reasons, but hey, as long as they're preaching Jesus, I'm not, it's not about competing or whatever.
I think it's interesting how typically when Paul writes his letters, and you see kind of like the same pattern repeated, where he gives that greeting, and this is almost the same greeting that he gives in every single letter. I, Paul, bondservant of Jesus Christ, grace and peace to you, which is also, I mean, Peter kind of like steals that as well, and then uses it in his letters. But typically, like as we saw in Philippians, when we read that together, we see Paul, immediately start to applaud the church in Philippi for the things that they were doing. Like, I'm so grateful because of all the good work that I'm hearing. You guys are doing, this and that. But, there's some issues that we're going to have to address. Here in Galatia, he gives like no compliments whatsoever. He's not applauding any of the work that they're doing here in this first chapter. He goes straight to the point, like straight to the punch. Yo, I'm astonished. Like I'm floored. I'm disappointed that I'm hearing that you guys have so quickly deserted the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ, and you're turning to a different gospel. So like, we typically talk about like church planting, right? Like amongst us and amongst a lot of those in leadership positions and such. This looks and sounds like a church plant, like a pretty young group of churches there in in Galatia that Paul probably, you know, worked intimately in establishing. And he's upset, man. He's really upset that quickly, almost like immediately, all the work that was you know done is being undone now just because of like, you know, misinformation coming into the church. And I think that that's a pretty, you know,
Current.
relevant word for us today, how misinformation can be so detrimental to the churches, to our faith. And if the apostles were alive today, what would they write to us? You know, what would the letter contain? You know, if we would be recipients of their attention.
Yeah.
Y'all just as crazy.
And I think going back a little bit to, you know, this, you know, these first two verses where he is showing like these credentials, right, that we're talking about. I don't know if verse 2 is part of the credentials, but either way, it seems like he's including people in on this, right? So he's not just saying like, "Oh, this is what I say, and this is blah 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 blah." He starts detailing everything. It seems like it's not just him simply saying like, "Hey, I'm saying hi, and so are all these people that are with me. They're also say hello." But this is what I had to say. I feel like, in a way, it shows two things. One, the validity of my apostleship is not only based on what I say and what my experience was, but it's also based on what other people have to say about me. And
Nice.
and the second thing is, I'm not saying this just plainly out of like my thoughts, viewing your situation, but I've consulted with other people, and in our group, we've come to a consensus that what I'm writing to you is true. You know,
That's
it's not
good.
just based on just like a couple of people or just based on what I have to say. It's based on my calling and what I understand of Jesus, but also this seems to be like a communal letter to another community of Christians.
I love that. It's like this is what the consensus is, and we're just writing you to remind you. And I can imagine it's hard. I mean, I know we talk about kind of how ministry has changed for pastors and what they used to look like in the early church and what it looks like now. But if you can imagine, I don't know how much time he spent in Galatia the first come around, right? But you know, maybe a year or 2 months, however long, and then to hear like that they're switching, you're like, oh no, we worked so hard to help people, you know, break from their understanding to what is truly the gospel. And it seems here, from what I was reading, that the different gospel was related to some Jews coming in and talking about circumcision being required, as what Paul preaches about. And he said, hey, it's not about what your works or what you do, as we saw in Romans, but it's about faith in Jesus that makes you a part of this community. You don't have to have circumcision. It's not a test of or a rite of passage. And so you have these people that are convincing them, hey, you know, what Paul taught isn't true. And they probably use the Bible to prove them. You know, they probably use the Old Testament to prove their point in the same way that Paul used it to build his. And he's just, and you can tell how against this he is, where he says, hey, these people are under God's curse. And whoever, you know, if anybody's preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted in the beginning, let them be under God's curse too, right? And so he's just really going in on that, that there's no ground to, or there's no what is it, value in focusing on yourself, because that's not what the gospel is about or what the message is. So you can really see his pastoral heart here. As you said, Gabe, he's not doing the lovey-dovey, hey, you know, I miss you. I've been praying for you in my prayers. He's like, no, this is so important for you to understand, and you're breaking literally the foundation of what your faith by accepting this, and that's why you address this so hard, right?
Often I hear a pastor that I'm sure, you know, us three we know and follow, Rich Riotas. He quotes another preacher, I'm not sure, or another theologian, in saying that the most important thing about us is the image of God that we have, right? And so the image of God that we have is what essentially will lead us to, you know, form doctrine, and also how we relate to others will be based off of the image and how we relate to ourselves. Whatever image that we have
Good.
of God,
Good.
that's going to
Good.
dictate the rest of that. And so Paul is, really showing his pastoral heart here, because the gospel, the image of God that they first taught the churches and the believers in Galatia was something totally different. And when you have a distorted image, it'll change everything else that follows. And, verse 7, Paul says, like, look, this is not just another account, right? Or it's not even the gospel that you're hearing. It's literally people who are disturbing and distorting the one that you already have, right? So that's the most dangerous part of it, because it's the gospel that you receive, but it's a distorted version. It's a completely doctored and edited, perverted. Yeah. So I often think, like, what kind of perversion would come into, the church, like what perverted gospel. And of course, Paul starts to describe that a little bit more in the letter as we move forward.
Yeah. And just to highlight here a little bit what we've been saying, it seems crazy. He's like, look, listen, the gospel that talks about Jesus is above anything, basically.
Yeah.
Because like even if an angel, he says, right, were to come down and say something else, bro, you curse that angel right away. All right. And all of verse 10 is actually in a negative light, according to like Paul's theology here. He says, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God, or am I trying to please people? Like both of those things, both of those sentences are wrong. He's not saying like, oh, am I trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Like, oh, I should be trying to win the approval of God. That's not what he's saying in that question. Both of those questions are implications like of something negative, not something positive. Paul in no way says like that you need to try to win the approval of God. In Paul's letter, you already have that. So that's how we should be reading that. Am I trying to win the approval of human beings or of God, or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to do those things, right, then I'm not a servant of Christ. That's what that's
good. That's good.
Super, super insightful, Brian, that portion. And it's crazy how just a small little tweak in the theology can distort the rest of the image completely. And Paul is so burdened by this because that is the most important and fundamental aspect of our faith, like what Christ did for us, the gospel. And any add-ons that we start putting into the mix completely ruins the picture.
Dude, that's so good, because I could imagine these people had good intentions in thinking that the circumcision was important or whatever the gospel message was, and they were seeking the approval of God and thinking like, this is my mission to right the wrongs of Paul, this heretic, right? Which is, I think, a lot of what we see here too today and during our day. A lot of people trying to be very strong warriors for God and trying to right wrongs and prove people wrong, and whether that be in faith or even in our whole COVID situation that we're dealing with. If you go through social media, you scroll through it, you have a lot of people that are trying to sharing a lot of videos where a lot of times coming from people that don't believe in what's actually going on, or in masks or vaccines, but just being very adamant and thinking I need to tell people the truth, and you're like, man, this is not what's.
I need to tell people that we've been infiltrated.
We've been infiltrated. We've been lied to. We've been playing with, and it's tough to see it because it's just like it's so consuming, right? Which I'm sure it was the same thing that was happening with those Jews coming in, that they're like, no, circumcision is the thing, and Paul's like, no, you guys are totally wrong. And I think this reminds me of what something I think Amos says when Prophet Amos, if I can look it up real quick.
You can't look it up, bro.
Huh?
If you don't know off the top of your head, how will you answer?
I gotta know if I can find the book. No, but Joel, Amos, Amos. There's a part here in Amos and this line here at the end of verse 10, which really spoke to me this morning when I was reading. I was like, man, if I were still trying to please people, I would not be doing what I'm doing right now. Like, trust me, like this is not, if I was looking to please people, I wouldn't be here. And Amos kind of has a similar line where, you know, some of the old prophets in the Old Testament, or some of the prophets in the Old Testament had to fight even their own kingdoms and other advisors and the kings that were, you know, denying their messages. And so there's a part here in Amos 7 where Amaziah, which I believe was the priest Bethel, goes and he's like, yo, get out of here, go back to your land, like nobody wants to hear your prophecies. And then he says, look, man, I was neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I was a shepherd, and I also took care of sycamore figs trees. But the Lord took me from tendering the flock and said to me, go prophesy to the people of Israel. So now listen to what I gotta say. So it's kind of like the idea where it's like, yo, I wouldn't be here if I'm not trying to be cool. I'm not trying to have like a following. Like I'm really here because this is my mission and this is what God has called me to do. And Paul kind of mentions that, right? Where, hey, look, called me. He'll talk about it later on in this chapter. But he's like, I'm not doing this necessarily because I like it 100%, because it sucks. It's hard. Ministry is tough. Like dealing with people and all their theories and ideas, and then having to fight people that have the wrong gospel. Like it's tiring. I'm not trying to do this to please people, because if I were, I'd be doing something else. But I you know, I wouldn't be a servant of Christ if I were trying to please people. And so I think for many of us, and especially in this last year, if you've been in ministry or a leader, you've kind of seen this because you've probably done something in your church that someone in your church didn't like, at least one person, right? And for some of us, it was a lot of people. For some of us, maybe it was half your board or whatever it is, in closing or asking for mask or encouraging vaccination or maybe whatever it was, right? And so you realize, hey, look, in ministry, you're not called to please people, but to serve Jesus, right? And I think it's a great message here that we see Paul sometimes, I think, as someone that was really loved and he was progressive and he was changing and moving the church forward. But he was really, even in the church, disagreed with, and even among the apostles, right? It's just like, hey, who maybe looked down on. And so for me, it was, man, this is powerful. If I were truly still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. And yeah, powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
So then he continues in verse 11. I'm going to share that on the screen real quick. Verse 11, it says, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached, going to what we've been saying, is not of human origin. I didn't receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. Like this is direct from God. For you have heard of my previous way of life in Judaism, how intensely I persecuted the church of God and tried to destroy it. I was advancing in Judaism because beyond many of my own age among my people, and was extremely zealous for the traditions of my father. But when God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his son in me, so that I might preach him among the Gentiles. My immediate response was not to consult any human being. I did not go up to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was, but I went to Arabia. Later, I returned to Damascus, and then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to get acquainted with Cephas and stayed with him 15 days. I saw none of the other apostles, only James, the Lord's brother. I assure you before God that what I'm writing to you is no lie, no cap. Then I went to Syria and Cilicia. I was personally unknown to the churches of Judea that are in Christ. They only heard the report. The man who formerly persecuted us is now preaching the faith he once tried to destroy. And they praised God because of me. That's powerful right there too, man. Wow. Any thoughts here? A lot to take in, but
yeah, you know, Paul essentially is laying the foundation of the gospel that he preached in Galatia. He's again like going through the credentials, and part of that process is showing that this is not human invention, and that there is a group of people, a community behind him that can verify and corroborate, you know, the message that he's preaching. I find it so fascinating that, you know, beyond him explaining how zealous he was in persecuting the church, you know, he basically says like, look, you know, I was set apart from Jesus by Jesus from the womb, and God revealed him to me. And once that happened, like I didn't immediately go out and start preaching the gospel and sharing. Like I think it's so important that Paul states that he goes to Arabia and then he goes back to Damascus, and that 3 years pass. Like that's a long time. 3 years of doing what? Like I don't know, studying, looking at scripture, meditating, learning,
unlearning too, I think.
and unlearning, of course. Especially because he just said how zealous he was for his ancestral traditions. And immediately, once he's ready, like once those 3 years pass, he goes to Cephas, right? He goes to Peter, right? And then he goes to James, the brother of Jesus, like two pivotal leaders in Jerusalem in the church, and then he begins to go preach. That's when his ministry starts, and I think that's so important that he gets that kind of like stamp of approval, if you will, or verified, right? Kind of like when an Instagram or Twitter account gets verified, like this is the real deal. This is the actual company or organization or personality, and you can trust the information is accurate based on who it is who's saying it. And Paul, I think that's what he's doing here. He's trying to let the people know, like, listen, this is not just my invention, right? And Peter goes into this in his letter that there's no prophecy that is, personal or private, right? There is and ought to be a community behind it that can say, like, yeah, this is true. This is real. And I think that's important for the church in Galatia to hear, that Paul is not just saying a personal prophecy, like he's saying and preaching a gospel that others believe in and can verify as well. I think that's an important message for our church today as well, because we hear different messages, and churches can be very vulnerable in hearing things that sound correct, but really don't have any, truth behind it to sustain it. And, one of the safeguards in that is, what we would call today peer review, right? In Paul's time, in Scripture's time, this was just, the community behind it. Solomon, I'm sure it was Solomon in Proverbs, where there's no, I forget the chapter 14, where there's no counsel or revelation, the people perish. But in the community in the presence of like multiple counsel, there is wisdom, there's safety. And I think that's important here. And that's what Paul is trying to, to express and communicate. Listen, this is a gospel that you can trust, because it's not just me. It's also Peter. It's also James, the brother of Jesus. These people can verify that the story that I'm sharing with you and have shared with you is true.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good verse too. Proverbs 11:14.
There you go. Where there's no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counsels, there is safety. I think maybe that's what Paul is trying to communicate here. That
I thought it was wisdom.
Yeah, that's a New King James version. So let me look at the Message Bible.
No.
Let's go straight to the Hebrew, bro. Come on.
You have accordance. By the way, man, scholar slip up. You using accordance as the text for.
Hey, we're trying to level up.
Yeah.
I like that, Gabe. I think that's a beautiful message. I think, and it goes back to that thing that Brian noticed in the beginning, right? That the letter is not just a greeting from the brothers and sisters, but it seems like, hey, the message he has is an agreement with the community.
Yeah.
And I think something now, especially as you were talking about misinformation earlier, we live in a time where you'll fancy what one person is saying over maybe what a larger group of people are communicating, simply
Mhm.
because it fits your narrative a little bit more, or fits what you're comfortable with, right? And so for these
Right.
Jews, if they were, I'm not too familiar with the Galatians, but if they were Jews that were kind of familiar with Jewish understanding and stuff, and Paul's coming, hey, you don't need there's no works that you can do to be justified. And I'm like, what? We've been taught that live by the law and you live, right? If you don't do it,
Yeah.
you get curses. And so you hear a guy coming saying, Paul's wrong, he's messed up, he's rogue, we don't know who, and he's circumcision is required. And so it's kind of like what we hear now, right? People believing the word of others, a select few maybe, and thinking that, hey, we're part of the remnant or the minority because it's only a few of us in this truth or idea. And it's the importance of that peer review process of, hey, man, has this theory or this idea been peer reviewed? And I think that's one of the big strong arguments for the word of God in the Bible, right? Not just in the actual written manuscripts that have been found, or and how credible or how faithful it's been to the text, right? And we have so many evidence of the Bible, but even just in the faith traditions and everything.
You got a visitor there, bro.
I have a visitor here. She's kind of going to go outside.
And I think, Seb, it's important, as you said, that there's a community behind it that can say, like, hey, we've tested this, and it lives up to what it says.
We're vouching for it. Yeah,
we can vouch for it. And just within the context of Galatians, Paul name drops probably the two most Jewish of disciples that he can find, Peter and James, right? And Peter, of course, there was that contention with him and Paul on the subject of circumcision. And then James, of course, in his letter, he writes, specifically to the Jewish people who were scattered abroad. So I think it's important that he's name dropping these two specific individuals as two folk who can, corroborate that this message is, it's true. It's in line with what Jesus taught.
Yeah,
it's good.
No, Paul definitely has some good references here. The part that really stands out to me is, right after he talks about his extreme, like, zealous behavior, right, about like his Judaism and all that stuff. Verse 15 says, "But when God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his son in me so that I might preach him among the Gentiles." Man, I feel like that part is so powerful because in a sense he's saying, like, yo, I was like God's number one enemy, especially like a young guy like me who made it pretty much to the top. I was God's number one enemy. I was so zealous to finish, this church and this movement. And in the midst of me making all these choices to get to where I am, whether that was through misinformation or what have you, he's like, but, God, it set me apart in my mother's womb. Like, before I did all of this, God set me apart. And after I did all of this, he, in his grace, was pleased to reveal his son in me. I was just like, what the heck? Like that. I think that part of this chapter just kind of, and that part of the letter, I feel, to whoever was reading it, just kind of cut people to the bone. That was like, wow, and I think that he goes to see Peter probably because Peter's the only one that's willing to receive him. Peter's like, listen, man, I got some heavy artillery, like, in the next room. I got my sword on me. Like, if this guy comes at me, I got this covered. Right. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why he goes to see Peter, is because he's probably the only one willing to receive him.
Yeah.
Sure.
And
he can relate.
Peter can solve it real quick, right? He has experience. So when I'm looking at who he goes to see, I feel like one, he goes to see Peter, right? Who knows what kind of discussions they have for 15 days, and then he sees
Yeah, interesting.
Jesus' brother probably to be like, "Hey, man, what is Jesus like?" Because this is what I saw. This is what his voice sounded like to me. Like, what did his voice sound like to you? Like when you got to actually speak with him and be with him. Is this something he would have said?
Mhm.
Is this how he spoke to like the blind man or the crippled or the woman going through her health issues?
Right.
And all those things kind of helped him corroborate that his gospel came from God, came from Jesus, like
Mm-hmm.
all those things. And I think that and something we were talking I was having this conversation with someone from church that the power of sharing our experiences,
Mhm.
we don't really acknowledge that as
Yeah.
much, and even when we're going through difficult times, like we don't really want to share that with anyone else.
Mhm.
And it just so happens that this month the theme here at Temple is um the waiting room, and it kind of shows
Mm.
like this Paul waiting for 3 years, man,
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
he ever encountered um other disciples. It's just it's crazy.
Mhm.
um but I feel like to his credit, in a way, he's trying to earn the respect, right, to even come close to people that were Christians already. If he would have just come like straight out of there and be like, "Hey, I'm converted" or whatever, he would have gained zero trust. He would have zero credit, right? And the fact that he took 3 years, and Christians were like, "Hey, we're not. This Paul guy is not really around that much." And to take that time to give people rest and then to be able to change their mind, I think is key. And we don't really have that today. People
Yeah.
can't really take a rest from information, from being exposed to different sources and things like that. There's no
Mm.
rest time.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah, go ahead.
Brian, you can almost use that experience that Paul has, those 3 years of, just doing almost,
Mhm.
no preaching, nothing that, a minister or a, servant would do. um, he's learning a lot about Christianity and the way, but he's also doing a lot of unlearning, a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
leaving behind the traditions that he was holding on to that were toxic and just not congruent with the gospel. And like, okay, so what is he saying to the church in Galatia? Like, it's
Mhm.
probably going to be an arduous journey as well, where they're going
Yeah.
to have to do a lot of work to leave behind some of the things that they too are clinging on to.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, for sure.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. We don't really talk about that as much when we come to church, though. I think in terms of we focus a lot on the learning new things, but not a lot of the unlearning of old things,
the,
right?
the
In terms of, hey,
deconstruction.
right, the
Yeah,
deconstruction. We just try to construct on top of that. But if, like you said, Gabe, if your foundation of how you view God is flawed, then how you view others and how you live and operate in this world is going to be completely flawed too.
yeah.
So,
I,
um,
I I like that the
that's
condition
beautiful.
for his calling to ministry had nothing to do with who he was or
Hmm.
what he was born into or
Yep.
the
His
things
pedigree.
that
Yeah.
he was trying to win, but he's like grace.
Yeah.
That's basically it. um and it just goes back to his basically his argument in this book is gonna be that you know
Hmm.
that at the end of the day, if there was anyone who could have claimed something by winning the approval of humans and of God, it would have been him.
Mm.
Right. Right. No, that's good. That's good. And I mean, for me here at this last part, right? Just the message of of a transformed life, the turnaround, right? They only heard the report, verse 23. The man who formerly persecuted us is now preaching the faith he once tried to destroy. And it's just a powerful testament, right? Where I think he's just setting up the case of his own apostleship, even in the midst of this, to say, look, God, no man, no person has put me here. It's not the church. It's literally God that called me. And he tells him his story. I didn't go looking for men or anything. I spent time on learning. And at the end of the day, it's this idea where it's truly God leading through his life that transformed him from being one that persecuted the church to now working in the church to expand that church and being persecuted because of that as well, right? So the persecutor becomes the persecuted, and the beautiful thing at the end is that they praise God because of me. They recognize that and they're like, wow, God can truly transform. So it's just his setting up himself to say, hey, look, I'm really, there's nothing about me that's special. Everything that I thought was special to me, like he says in Philippians, right, is I consider it as trash because it was all wrong. It was built on the wrong foundation. And now that I'm built on the right foundation, it's not about me. It's not about my message and what I want. It's about, sharing the message of Jesus. Compelling, very compelling.
Yeah, and again, he hits the same point that that if there was anyone who was able to win the approval, it would have been him when he was a zealous Jew, and it would be him if you're just talking about Christians,
Yep.
and even still he chucks it up to grace, and at the end he says, and they praise God because of me, and because of what he was doing, because how God was using him, not because of who all his different credentials were whatsoever. And I think that many times we praise people for their credentials, not necessarily like praise God for what God is doing in in them and through them or whatever. And so I think that that's something important to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Man, great conversation. Galatians going to be interesting as we get further into it, what his message to the church is, and trying to instruct them on what the true gospel is. So yeah, great conversation. So going into our lightning round, unless anybody had any final words on Galatians, but I think we're good. All right. So first things first, priorities. Messi's first game.
I was hoping it'd be today, man, but it seems like it's not.
We've talked about Messi. We have pictured him as a PSG player, happy. Man, I was telling Brian Gabe right before just how many videos I've been consuming lately of PSG and trying to understand French. I might finally learn French now because todo está en francés. But correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I don't know if I had heard it from somewhere, but I thought that whatever league you were in as a coach, you had to coach in that language.
I don't.
I thought
no, I don't think
I had
so.
seen a video, I think, of Bayern when Pep was there, and I think it was like in Germany, and he was saying like, "Oh yeah,
Pep is different though. Pep
is different.
Pep learns languages very quickly, and also he has just a background, knowledge of these
really
languages.
It's up to the coach, man. It's up to the coach.
Like that's tough.
Pep grew up in Europe, so I feel like if you grew up in Europe, you're kind of like exposed more to these neighboring countries and languages.
Yeah. I mean, how many people have you come in contact with who are like, oh yeah, I know 5 languages? It's like that's common over there. It's only here in the States where it's like, oh, you have to learn one, or not even dominate, just kind of sort of learn one, get a C, and move on.
Yeah. With Pochettino, I think
but Pochettino understands.
But again, like most of his players, like most of the players have a pretty good understanding of Spanish. Like half the team is Latino. Then you have.
I mean, the president came out and said that he needs to learn Spanish now because that's what the team speaks.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because all the videos I've been watching, when you hear the actual players or some of the coaches training them, right, you hear a lot of Spanish, like dale, uno más, dos, tres, cuatro. So I was surprised. At first, I don't know where I had learned that. It just stuck with me that depending where you were, that was the dominant. But it makes sense depending on the coach, depending on the players.
I mean, it would make sense if you were talking about another, French team that had mostly French players,
Right.
But you're talking about PSG. They have a bunch of stars from everywhere right now, South America, Spain, and so it's just like, typically the person who speaks Portuguese is easier for them to understand Spanish,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and things of that sort. Plus, most of those guys went through the Spanish league anyway.
Yeah.
And yeah, dude. And Pochettino speaks English as well, and English is the dominant language. It's the I guess the world language that everybody kind of just has to speak if they want to get anywhere. And he speaks that fluently, so with a huge heavy accent, but
you shoot the ball to me, and then
he understands French perfectly fine too. Like the girl in their interviews is like talking to him 1,000 miles an hour, and he answers back in English, right? Or in the press conference,
Mhm.
if they have a different accent, different French accent, or say things in the way that he doesn't understand, he has a translator there
Mhm.
who speaks all kinds of languages.
Yeah, man. Oh wow, that's pretty cool. So it looks like he'll be possibly playing on Sunday, depending on
Not
whatever they say.
next Sunday, right?
So the question
Not
is,
this Sunday,
the
because
29th,
they play right
yeah.
now after we're done.
This is what
Had
I'm-
to swing by church and then catch the game.
well, the question is, once they're made available, because I've checked already a number of times, but are we all getting Messi PSG jerseys?
Ooh.
Is that a thing? Listen, I really like the.
They're not bad.
the-
They're nice.
Yo,
They're
they're
nice.
fly, bro.
They're
With the
good.
Jordan logo, those things are fly. I'm not
Dude,
gonna.
that's the one thing I hate about it is the Jordan logo.
Dude, did you hear? I think actually because Messi signed with PSG,
Yeah.
Michael Jordan raked in like an extra $14 million, bro.
Yeah.
Nuts. That's the Messi effect.
Literally, bro. The Messi effect is on full display.
Yeah. Make the rich man richer.
And La Liga is just suffering from all that.
Yeah. I think I don't know, man. I'm not passionate about the Jordan logo. It's like stay in your lane, man.
crossover.
Like your thing's basketball, stay with basketball. Nike, just have the Nike logo. Like it's the same thing. Just have
I
the
just
Nike
think
logo.
it looks nice,
And
though.
the shorts look like basketball shorts. I'm like, that's ugly to me, man. I'm sorry.
Hey, as long as it's not football.
No, man. It's like okay, let's all wear runners uniforms now. Like
Yeah.
spandex
It's kinda hard.
shorts
Yeah,
and
yeah,
kind
it
of
is. I
like
remember
it
that.
just doesn't like to me. I'm sorry, it doesn't look good. You can call me like a
We were going
purist or
through that
whatever, but
with
yeah,
the
I think
sponsors on
the
basketball jerseys. Yeah.
Brian's a soccer Puritan.
Yeah, he's like a purist.
no, man.
Like Ted Lasso, huh?
I don't see it, man. I don't like people. I understand people are liking it, but
Yeah,
I
we'll
don't
see.
see it, man.
He said, keep basketball out of soccer. Man.
Yeah. It's like when they changed the basketball jerseys. What did they have before? Adidas, and now like their
Now they have the
sponsor
sponsors and stuff. Yeah.
is something else, and it's just like
It's Nike now, and then they have like little, sponsors on the
Yeah, it is strange.
uniforms.
It is strange. But well, we're looking forward to Messi's hopefully then 29 August 29 at 7. I think that's I don't know what time that is.
Was that Eastern Standard Time or
Possibly. I don't know if they would play morning or if that's 7:45 their time.
it's probably during the afternoon here.
So, all right, next one. We've seen all the news. Afghanistan, the U.S. has almost fully pulled out. They still have, I think.
You're
10,000 I don't
really
know.
shifting us into a political
Yeah. Well, just not. I just your
conversation
your reactions. I'm not trying to give what the because I think I don't even know what kind of policy and stuff. It's a really tough situation. But just your reactions and seeing some of the stuff.
I don't know, man. I don't feel like I have enough information to be able to say like, yeah, it's good or no, it's bad. Biden came out and said like, hey, there was never a good time to leave, and I don't think we should have been in there in the first place. I think that sucks a lot for people who have family members or close friends that have gone to Afghanistan, that had toured there. And it's just like, what was the point of that? And now, like, they got taken over by other people. They're not technically, according to our definition, right? They're not free. or democracy, I guess, hasn't won there.
Mm.
And so it seems like all these years have been a bit pointless as far as getting the results that you thought the United States wanted, right?
Mhm.
And so I think it makes our nation look bad, any way you put it, you know. And it sucks for the people there, all the supposedly this group says that they're going to respect certain things, but you don't
Yeah,
really know,
you
you
don't.
know. You don't know if they're going to respect, the rights that, women did have under, the military occupation of the United States. And I don't know. I think it's sad because people are suffering, but I don't know the extent of anything. So
Yeah,
I don't think I have enough information to
make a
have a reaction that that serves Afghanistan best.
mhm,
I
mhm.
don't know.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
I think my reaction it's kind of along the same lines. I don't have too much information to form
Mhm.
a nuanced opinion.
Right.
I think my initial reaction was, wow, we were still in Afghanistan after all this time.
Right.
Um, and, I don't mean that in a jokingly or, disrespectful way. It's just, I was a little kid. I
Mhm.
remember vividly 9/11 and, um,
Yeah.
the first talks of going to war in Afghanistan. And I remember there, even then, like still as a third grader, just having questions and, confusion as to like why we were going into Afghanistan in the first place. And, I have family members who did tours in Afghanistan and also Iraq. But yeah, my initial reaction is like, we were still over there after this,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
long. And secondly, for me, it just, I guess saddened by the fact that, us going over there as a nation, perpetuated like a cycle of refugee making. Like now we leave and now there's, a ton of refugees that are seeking shelter and, seeking place to go. And I hope that our disdain for, the way things kind of just tumbled as soon as we went out, like we will keep the same energy in welcoming the refugees into our
Yeah.
borders and helping those who are actually in need, and not just like the Christian Afghanis, but also like those who are suffering, and that's it,
Mhm.
period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. There's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot too. Like you said, I agree with you guys in the sense of we're still there. We were still fighting. Not sure what was going on and what all. But now in seeing that, it just seems that there is a leadership issue, right? When you think of like transitions, you would want the place that you're leaving. If you leave your church, I know it's different and it's very simplifying it now, but you wouldn't want your church to fall and collapse completely if you left, right? So there just seems to be either some miscalculations of what the Afghanistan forces could do in holding back the Taliban, whatever it is, right? It's yeah. But my reaction is just it's sad, right? I've heard a couple conversations and podcasts on some of the translators that the army had there that were promised visas to the United States, as we've done many times, right? How we use people for their resources or abilities and then don't really help them out later. And so they're over there at the expense of probably losing their lives because they helped the enemy, right? In the Taliban's mind. So just, it's hard to see that, and people that we've used just say, all right, we're going to kind of just leave them there, not really have a plan of how we're going to help them and get them out. And just for the people there, it seems like, yeah, it was just maybe a 12, 14-year break, and now they're back to where they were before, and we just came in and,
Yeah, it wasn't even a break though. I mean, it was
it
still a
was, yeah,
hostile
it was still,
environment.
yeah,
And you can kind of see how when you build something based on a respect that's founded on fear, It's not going to last after that, party that instilled that fear leaves.
Yeah.
Good for you. You left the president. Good for you. You left somewhat of a trained army.
But
But
the reason they
even
weren't
there, there's been
attacking,
like reports that of people like leaving their armed forces or betraying or whatever, and it's just like, yeah,
we have to do a different way of how we approach foreign policy. Last thing, and in this more thought, COVID thoughts, as we've been, I don't know how it's going up there in New York, but COVID has been rampant down here in Florida. It's been tough. It's been hot. For some people don't think it's there, but it's there. Our hospitals are full. And so any thoughts so far on what's
yeah.
been over a year and a half, maybe?
I mean, Florida hasn't been one in anything ever, so it's nice. I think, well, it's not nice, but I think they're like, oh, we got to be one in something, and this is maybe the only opportunity Florida can be, first in the forerunner, and COVID, because apparently,
Annoying.
I mean, it just perpetuates this like whole, idea that we're an uneducated state, full of people that don't have common
really care.
sense. And shout out to our governor.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think there's like I've been able to be, especially more recently, help kind of really hand in hand with the hospital nearby, and really trying to help out in whatever way we can, and just hearing from the chaplains and the workers there, and the disconnect that you see, because obviously you drive around, you don't really see all the people falling down on the ground, it's easy to forget. But when you talk to people that are working, they're like, we're just so tired, man. And it's like not having the support from the community, and us still dealing with this, when knowing that a lot of this could be helped or remedied through social distancing, wearing masks, being wise, getting your vaccine. And then even now, it's like 95% of the people, 98% of the people in the hospital are unvaccinated people. So the misinformation, and then the fighting now that we're having here on schools, and requiring masks or not requiring masks, and making it a parents issue. It's just
doesn't make sense, man. Like if the governor's like, yeah, no masks, and your two biggest school districts are going against you and saying like, no, we're gonna have masks, even when you're saying like, oh, we're not gonna fund you. I mean, dude, open your eyes a little bit, man. I think that definitely, as you were saying, Seba, it's just a sense of misinformation here in Florida, where in other places it's just like, hey, that's cool, you want to go out to restaurants, you want to be part of like the social environment of our living here in the state or in the city or whatever. All right, get your COVID vaccine. If you have your COVID vaccine, you can do it. If you don't, then you can't. I'm not taking away any freedom from you. I'm saying if you want to do that, then you have to do this. Just like if you want to drive a car, you need a license. It's that simple. But
I think many people have been confused as to what is a COVID mandate and what's a COVID requirement.
Right.
And knowing what the difference is. And also, here in New Jersey, we don't really have too much of a problem. Governor Murphy, from day one, basically said, look, school year starting again, and masks are going to be required. It's it's just a reality here, and even here in New Jersey, because it's such an international state, right? We have 3 international airports in the area, one in Newark, 2 in New York City, and then we have also Philadelphia, which is South Jersey. There's so much travel and transit going in and out that there's a lot of people that have gotten sick, specifically with the Delta variant. And every county in New Jersey, save 1 or 2, is a high risk area for the Delta variant. So yeah, it's a shame that there's a lot of misinformation. I think a lot of what we're seeing now from some politicians, like Governor DeSantis in Florida, and also Abbott in Texas, it's just a show, really, to appease their political
to pander to their group. Yeah.
You know, like the radical groups in
Win the
you know,
approval of human
uh,
beings.
There it
those,
is. There it is.
yeah, it's a shame. And you know what? You know, it's sad that Governor Abbott got COVID-19 literally this past week. It just goes to show that the guys who are going around and, you know, saying like, oh, you know, like we don't need to take this seriously. Like, yo, Governor Abbott was vaccinated, and here he is, like, you know, doing this misinformation campaign about the vaccine and the virus and the masks. You know, it's just, guys, you know, so many people are being fooled by these, you know, poor actors in some of you know, the most powerful seats of politics in our country, and it's sad.
It is very sad. And just for me, just looking and seeing the misinformation that literally is killing people. I have, you know, my sister's a nurse and aunt is a nurse, and talking to some of the doctors here, and they're like, you know, the words that people hear when they're in the ICU is, I wish I would have gotten the vaccine, you know, and I would have been, I wish I could have been. And at that point, it's like,
it's too late.
I mean, we can try to do all these things for you. And then what's interesting too, there's a lot of thoughts, but
I mean, my last thought on this is the following: we as Adventists, we believe in the health message, and, you know, we believe in healthy living, and, you know, we promote plant-based diet and you know, staying away from, you know, meat and all that. You know, we understand that this is not like the save all, right? Like, if you eat plant-based food only, you're still going to be subject to many ailments and infections and diseases and perhaps bacteria, you know, because we understand that all of creation has fallen subject to the power of sin, and even the plants and the fruits and the vegetables that we eat are not perfect, and we can get sick, and we would need medicine. Most of our diet and message is all about preventative, right? Preventative medicine. Well, guess what? The vaccine is just that. It is preventative medicine. So,
yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah. So a lot of thoughts, but thank you guys for sharing that. And looking forward to continuing the trek on our journeys as Paul was, and just saying, hey, keep the main thing the main thing. It's sad to see, especially Christians, right, and Adventists, so caught up in trying to literally becoming evangelists of other stuff, right? Of hoax, of Fauci being a liar, of this and that, and you're like, man, where's the message of Jesus? That's really the truly life-saving thing, right? Of just a, hey, what's so
sure.
Just an encouragement, guys. Get vaccinated. Be careful. Watch yourselves. Wash your hands. Eat your vitamins. But awesome, guys. So thanks for joining us. Yeah, you wear your mask, and love your neighbor, man. And listen and talk to someone that's in your local hospital, man. So many people come up with like, oh, this New York hospital, man, they were doing this or this New York. And I'm like, bro, go to the Palm Coast Hospital, man. Talk to the guy. Like they go to our church. Like the chaplains go to our church. Ask them how they're doing. But it's always like this random sketchy place in Texas. They're doing good. All right, y'all. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next time. Peace.